You're listening to the Para is My Normal podcast. We are a bit science, a bit woo, and all curious about that which defies explanation because sometimes normal just isn't.
So picture this, a giant pile of gear, cords tangled, tripods sticking out at weird angles, cases stacked like jingle blocks on the verge of collapse. Something like that. This, my friends, is some gear load. So today we're going to talk about REM pods, spirit boxes, cameras, trigger objects, you name it. It's probably in that heap, to be honest with you. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's a mountain of gear right there. So the truth is, it doesn't make you a better investigator. In fact, most of it can probably get in your way. Let's talk about gear. Real gear, the kind that works with you, not against you. Because at Pairs My Normal, we spent years collecting, testing, carrying, swearing at, and ultimately ditching gear. And what we've come to realize is simple. The best tools are the ones that don't steal your focus. They enhance your senses. They don't replace them. So in this episode, we're diving deep into paranormal investigation gear, what's out there, what people use, what we actually use, and how we false positive proof every session we do. And if you're just starting out, or even if you've been doing this a while and feel buried in the buzzers and the blinking lights, this one's for you. Let's go. So when we first started, we did what a lot of people do. We bought all the shiny stuff. We watched the TV shows. We took notes on what the TV teams were using, and we loaded up on everything that had red light and made a beep. We had K2 meters, cat balls, like so many cat balls, voice recorders, camcorders, SLS cameras, REM pods, trigger objects, laser grids for two people. But every tool is exciting. Every new gadget felt like we were leveling up in a way. But then something happened. We started actually investigating. And then we realized a lot of the stuff, and I'm going to say that honestly, it's stuff. A lot of the stuff just sat there, or worse, it distracted us. It pulled us away from the moment, and it pulled us away from the experience we were trying to have. And that's when we started to strip back a little bit, one piece at a time. We really started to ask, what are we actually using? What's actually giving us results? What's possibly giving us false results? Because, right, if you don't understand how your gear works, you don't understand how to use the gear. What can we verify in more than one way? How can we kind of hold our tech accountable? And then eventually our entire approach changed, to be honest with you. So today, in our investigations, we focus on three pillars: audio, visual, and intuition. And everything we bring supports one or more of those three. Let's start by giving credit where credit is due. There's no shortage of creativity in the paranormal community when it comes to tools. People have invented some wild stuff to try to bridge that gap between our world and whatever's on the other side. So let's walk through the main categories of gear investigators use and what they're really hoping to capture with each. So audio gear is probably the oldest form of paranormal tech. Even before there was tech, people have always listened for the bump in the night, that knock on the wall, the whisper no one really said. But today's tools, we have digital voice recorders that are great for capturing potential EVPs, but also prone to background contamination if you're not careful. You also can get binaural or even 3D microphones. It adds spatial dimension. You also have spirit boxes. We'll talk more about those later, but they are quite polarizing. And then portal devices, these clean up the audio from the spirit boxes, supposedly to make the responses clear. And then, of course, microphones and then speakers. We use microphones on our video recording to clean it up because we realized the stock audio just wasn't clear enough. So we use some Rode microphones, and then speakers we use when we're doing, say, a trigger event. And audio can be extremely valuable, but we've learned to never really take it at face value. So the next form is the video. The visual, what we see. And this one is great because we tend to trust what we see, but our eyes can be deceived. So can our cameras. So the tools we use in this realm are infrared cameras. They're great for night vision. Full spectrum cams. These shoot beyond the visible light range. And of course, laser grids. So we have both the laser pen, the green dots, and the GS2 laser grid, both of which detect depth changes. And these are excellent for confirming movement, either in the environment or not in the environment. And of course, there's SLS cameras. These are the Connect-based devices that map figures. Now, people either swear by these or call them total bunk, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. And then static cameras for rooms, for hallways, are typically IR capable. You can even get motion triggered ones like trail cams. Of course, in addition to the video, we also look at still photography. And these are really great for before and after comparisons and documenting light anomalies. So visual evidence is compelling, but we've learned to verify it from multiple angles. So that one figure on that one camera is not really proof, but we look at it as a starting point. Now, another group of gear would be motion detection and periphery. So here's a lot of things that beep and light up. These tools detect changes in motion, static electricity, even environment or electromagnetic fields. Some examples include our REM pods. They light up when something disturbs the field around the antenna. They can also be triggered falsely, which I've covered in another episode, Tech or Trick #1, where we talk about when the ghost is actually a radio. There's also motion sensors. We have microwave sensors, PIR sensors. These are really good for your entry and exit points to see if there's movement around, and especially if you're alone, if other people are there with you. And then something like a geophone, a footstep tracker, can be used to detect movement on a floor. We also have EMF detectors, including our GQ EMF 390, which we personally use. But there's K2s and there's tons of other data logging devices out there. Detectors, we have a static detector and a static spike sensor, and these help isolate if there is static happening or could it be a radio frequency or another wave. We also have yes/no pods, and we use them in tandem with other tools to reduce interpretation errors. And this category specifically gets tricky fast because once you learn what else can trigger these, it's harder to trust. And that's why we never truly rely on one tool alone. I love quoting Lauren Hellickson when she says, "How do you know it works until you know how your gear works? What can do the false positives? What can trigger it? And then you can understand a little bit more." There's also another group called ITC devices. So those would be your spirit boxes, a Chattergeist, Obelisk, the ITC tools that use random word generation based on input sensors and algorithms. There's also hundreds of apps out there. So many apps. Real talk, most are junk. A few might be usable if you understand what they're actually doing under the hood. Preferably for us, we like Ghost Chatter because it is not an ITC device. What it does is allow you to do an isolation session or a solo investigation, and it asks questions on your behalf so you can do Estes, or you can have it ask the questions when no one's around for an abandonment session. So there's multiple different fields here that we use in tools, but we also need to tread very carefully in the gear because a lot of these tools are easily romanticized, right? It's even easier still to misread. You need strict protocols, clear questions, and layered validation if you're going to use them seriously. And another thing, these are all for entertainment. These are not sold as actual paranormal gear, but it's more so like paranormal entertainment because that's what they are. Now, some other people like to use for interaction or trigger objects, cat balls. They're very prone to false triggers, dolls or toys, especially in locations with child spirits. Flashlights, we've talked about extensively the flashlight method, the Tech or Trick episode on the flashlight method. Controversial, we don't use it for communication, but others do. Plasma balls, these can be used as interactive toys. And music boxes, it also can be a good proximity sensor because they're triggered by motion or proximity. And these can be really fun and evocative, but again, one tool is never enough. So let's take a breath here. We've gone through a lot of tools. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, we get it. That's where we were too. So in the second half of the episode, we're going to show you what we narrowed things down to, what we actually use now, and what we leave behind. And how we build protocols to guard against our own bias and technology's blind spots. Because to be real honest, the more gear you carry, the more gear you have to prove wrong. So stay with us. So here's the part everyone's been waiting for. What do we actually use? When we show up for an investigation, whether it's a massive prison, historical mansion, or a haunted theater, we roll in with a very intentional setup, intentional to the space. It's compact, it's reliable, and it's designed to support those three core things: audio, visual, and intuition. Everything we bring fits under one of those categories, and if it doesn't serve at least one of those purposes, we leave it behind. So let's start first with audio. So we use Zoom H1N handy recorders, and then we also use a Zoom H3 VR 360 recorder. And we really love the Zoom brand. The reason I prefer the Zoom brand is because you have a very high quality machine. This is an amazing recorder. professional recording capability you get from these is outstanding. This 360 recorder actually is like professional level. You can actually use it for like movies and recording spatial audio for augmented reality or virtual reality. We use this particularly in investigations to provide that spatial awareness. So we use it in conjunction with other recorders so we can capture sounds, and then through the spatial awareness, we can understand where exactly that sound was coming from. Very beneficial in large areas, very beneficial when you're also trying to rule out, could it be something else? If you can isolate where in the space a room is coming from, it can help you debunk it or investigate it further to figure out what may have been causing that. Now, these H1N handy recorders, these are the prior generation, and I will say you would want the prior generation versus the brand new one. The reason why, and you can still get these online, the reason why is that these have a very high quality recording with a very low bass and a very high ceiling. So you are getting the largest range that you can for recording, but it doesn't create internal noises. You don't get internal artifacts from these. And in fact, they zoom H1Ns, very low possibility for getting a false positive on your EVPs. They record crystal clear, very tailored. You can dial in your gain, a lot of different very easy to use though, honestly. It's very easy. It looks kind of complex with the two, but honestly, these are our preferred standard of recorders. Now they're about $100 each, so it might not be in everyone's price point. And we're not going to talk about the 360. I think it's under $300 for sure for the 360 recorder. But again, and you don't need this. We do it because of how we really focus on audio and visual. So on the audio side, those are our three main recorders that we use. Mike has one, I have one, and then the 360 we place in the middle of the space, again, for that spatial awareness. Now we also have our old recorders, which this is like an Amazon special. It was $30 on Amazon. We have two of those. All right. And then we have another version of a recorder. So these we leave in different areas as well. If we just want to gather sound, right? So we'll carry the H1Ns with us, but we'll keep them static where they're set up on a tripod. And then these we can maybe carry around with us. Some are handy to show in a pocket. So we use multiple layers because that also helps validate things. Ideally, if you capture sound only in one, more likely that it's internal contamination or that it's an internal artifact with that one recorder. But if you catch the thing on multiple, then there's more interesting context to that. And it allows you to dig a little deeper into what you're hearing. The other thing we like about this, just want to make a very quick note, when you're recording EVPs, you do not want an MP3 version. You want it to record in WAV format. And the reason why is digital compression. When it gets expressed in a digital file, such as an MP3 version, even in video like this, an MP4, if you will, it compresses it so much that you don't really get all the information. And through that compression, it can actually alter what you're hearing. So it can be creating artifacts just through the act of compression. And this is why I quote Lauren, how do you know it works if you don't know how it works? Because understanding really how much of EVP recorders create the EVPs themselves, or what we think are EVPs, when they're really internally generated artifacts. The biggest offender of all this is the DR60. Yeah, like what people consider the gold standard for recording. You see all the ghost shows have it. They're like go for $4,000 right now because they're no longer made. They haven't been made since probably the 90s. It was Panasonic's biggest fail as a voice recorder because it created artifacts. It would warp what you were saying. It would create noises that were never really there internally, and it would show up on people's recordings. It was such a bad voice recorder. The reason they stopped making it was because it was such a crappy recorder. So why are we using it in the paranormal field? Oh, because we're getting all these amazing EVPs. No, you're actually getting false artifacts created from the recorder. So I'll get off my soapbox about that. But again, so for recording, we use the H1Ns, we use the 360 sound. You do not need to. Any recorder will work. Make sure it's recording in WAV format and play around with it. See what you like, see how it works for you. Now, another thing we do for audio is we do use spirit boxes. I actually have two. I have the SB7, but I also have the S box from Ghost Stop. However, we use these with protocols in place. So the whole idea of a spirit box, right, is that it's scanning very quickly the radio waves, and then ideally spirits can interact with it. And then the whole idea of the portal, we have this one from Paraforce, is that it actually cleans up so you don't get that, you don't hear any of the scanning of the static. You actually only hear what is coming through as a voice. But the protocol for using Spirit Box, and actually this is a protocol we use even for our EVPs, our digital voice recorders. We make sure it's in a Faraday bag. So I have these Faraday bags here. I also have a Faraday wallet. In investigations, we have 2 of these Faraday wallets. They are secured. They have the Faraday lining. So the idea of a Faraday bag, cage, wallet is that it blocks all radio frequencies and EMF. So it can't get into it. So I actually, in investigations, keep my phone in this, in airplane mode, but also in here, just to reduce the opportunity for any sort of contamination from the phone interacting with our gear. Mike does the same. And then we put our recorders in the Faraday bags, and then the same thing. Even if we're using a portal, we put the Spirit Box in one of the bags, we seal it up, and then we go ahead and run it. And this reduces interference from the words that come through a radio. Now, do we truly believe Spirit Box? No. And in fact, if we were doing like a residential investigation or an actual investigation for people, we 100% wouldn't even touch a Spirit Box. No, not at all. Nope. Because it's too subjective. It really is. Definitely more for entertainment value, definitely more to see if we can get layered information on a space. And for me, my inquisitive mind, I just want to know what can come through here. Do I really think spirits can speak through a box? You know what? We don't know. And if it's anything we know about the paranormal, again, it's that we don't know anything about the paranormal. So that kind of wraps up what we use for our audio. Oh, except for the ITC devices. So I'll put it under audio, but it's more like visual audio, if you will. We use the Chattergeist instead of an obelisk. The obelisk just has too much question because of the way it interacts and it pulls things and the AI aspect of it. Chattergeist, we love. One of our very first episodes, actually was with Barry Reeder, who is the designer of the Chattergeist. Went into extreme detail on how it works. But honestly, I have to say, Mike and I and all of our friends, a lot of our friends have bought the Chattergeist because of us. We love the Chattergeist. It really is a great, clean ITC tool. There's absolutely no way it can get a false positive. There's no interaction. It doesn't know where you're at. It doesn't connect to the internet. There's no microphone. There's no speaker. So it can't produce sound. It doesn't hear sound. It doesn't know where you're at. It's literally just reading the environment and then using an algorithm to pull words or do any of the other features with it. We'll put a link below in the show notes for any of that information as well. Let's move into video. So for visual, what we do is Mike and I will both wear one of these body cams. It's 4K, it's infrared, beautiful. You don't need any auxiliary lights. It actually shines so much light red that we've been able to see the entire space. So these are wonderful little cameras. I think they're about $200 each. So that's not bad at all. And we love this because it helps capture our point of view. We can make it a static cam if we want. We can wear it. This has been really cool because it allows us to really focus on our investigation and not have to like sit there and constantly set up cameras and whatnot. So every investigation, we bring this. We also have, for still features, we have a full spectrum, basically GoPro. And I like this because it operates in all lights. So we actually have a full spectrum light that works with them. And then for our static cams, we do have 2 camcorders that also have night vision. They're 4K as well. These we mount on tripods and we put them in long hallways or facing a central space. It just gives us additional eyes. So we don't use them typically, but if we're alone and we're in a very large space, it's like Ohio State Reformatory, Eloise Asylum, those are the places that we will go ahead and set up a static cam in an area we're not in that we can capture the ambient or just kind of baseline. But also, like I said, it gives us additional eyes so we can go back to the footage if we hear something or see something and we're questioning, wow, where did that bang come from? Hopefully through our other cameras, we'll be able to capture something normal so we can debunk it, i.e. we hear a slam and then on a camera we catch the wind knocking something on the window, right? It just gives us, or we could see someone walking through an area even if we think we're alone, right? So those are the things. Just having more eyes available to us is important for safety, but also to go back and really validate anything we heard or experienced, possibly. So that's why we really like the visual side of things. So visually as well, we also use a GS2 laser grid. Now that's that really large red grid. We love that because that really helps with visual distortion data. So if something breaks the beam, we'll be able to tell if something's truly moving. Now we also have a green laser grid. That's the green like dots that you see. Now that we use for baselining. So that is actually better to see the movement of things. If you see the lights flicker, it's likely dust, bugs, just environmental movement of the air. So we also did a tech or trick on lasers, the green versus red. So go ahead and listen to that to find out why they are different and why we prefer to use both. But specifically, if we're trying to capture movement in a space, then that laser grid is more likely going to give us what we're looking for. The GS2, the red laser grid versus the green pen that does the dots. But we use both, and we use both in conjunction because they do different things and they both show up differently on camera. Now, we sometimes bring an SLS camera, but to be honest, we're packing for Eloise. I'm leaving it here. And the reason why is you have to understand its full limitations. First of all, an SLS camera maps figures based on human shape patterns. So easy to get false positives. Even if you're moving or shaking, it's going to momentarily blip and you're going to see a pattern that can look like a human, which would then make people think, oh my goodness, there's a spirit over there. So honestly, we've kind of gotten away from using it just because we're like, well, honestly, we have to lug the whole thing around. It's a lot more gear. And with the false positives, we just rather not use it. If we do bring it out, then we always check it with something else. We have another camera on it. We keep it stationary. We don't really carry it around. We try to gather something, environmental data, audio, put it next to a static sensor with a REM pod or something of that nature to see if we can capture. So again, layering if we use it because of the false positives. So that brings us to the next point. When we do use the interaction gear, we'll call them the blinky buzzy things. We don't use one, we use multiple, but we don't just throw it all out there just to see what happens. So it's very intentional. So first of all, we'll never just drop a REM pod and say we're done. We'll pair that REM pod with a static meter because the key is, and again, if you've listened to the tech or trick with when the ghost is really a radio, you'll know that REM pods are super susceptible to being set off by any number of things. Literally miles away, something can happen. Hundreds of miles away, something can happen that can actually trigger your REM pod. Because of that, we only really look at it with a static sensor next to it because that will at least tell us if it's static causing it or if it's a radio frequency rave. And big difference there. So if the static meter doesn't go off, but the REM pod does, we're most likely going to say, you know what, inconclusive because it's likely some form of interference or not something interacting specifically with that REM pod. Maybe we'll set up a yes, no with it too, especially if we're looking for patterns, which is what we're always doing. We're always looking for patterns, right? So let me give you an example. So say we're in a basement room and we set up a REM pod. We set up maybe the static detector with it, of course. Maybe you do a motion puck. We have, our Nova device or like a microwave sensor or one of our motion detectors, but we also place a recorder on the far side of the room. So say that motion puck lights up, the REM pod chirps, and then we hear a small sound on the recorder, but only on the right channel, not the one near us. So that's really worth digging into. But on its own, each tool could be reacting to something completely random. A shift in temperature over here, a draft over here, a stray signal for the REM pod. But when 3 or 4 of these tools, they're differently triggered tools. When 3 or 4 of these go off in sequence, and that sequence lines up with the physical space and environmental data, now that's the type of thing we flag for review, and that's really what we hope to get. Not just a REM pod going on or off, but really a culmination of the layers, because it helps keep our tech accountable, helps keep us accountable, and we're not biased towards it. And we even compare time steps. We cross-check with other sensors. We track how close our phones and radios were to that area. Because when we can't debunk it, we still can't call it proof. But we can call it a lead and something for us to look at more intentionally. Speaking of intentionally, let's talk about the intuition side of it. This one's a little harder to explain because it's not the gear you carry, but it is just as important. Now, we believe by being in tune into a location matters. Like your body knows when something shifts. You feel it in the air, right? You know when you walk into an area and energy changes. How many times do you walk in and say, ooh, something's different? But we don't just trust it blindly. We try to test it a little bit. So if one of us feels something in a hallway, we document it, we mark it, we set up a recorder, maybe we put up a couple different sensors, and then we check. Does anything correlate with that feeling? And if it does, that's a point for intuition supported by data. Now, intuition in this case isn't the shortcut. It's really a guidepost for us. We need to listen to our bodies to kind of really tune into the place to know what it feels like. But what we don't do is we try to limit the information we have about the paranormal experiences in a location. We try to limit that because we don't want to introduce bias to what we do. Because if we know that certain things happened in certain areas or what people are experiencing, we're going to be expecting to experience the same. So I know this is a different point of view. A lot of people want to go in knowing everything so that they can try to replicate it. Unless we're going into a residential situation where they specifically have had experiences, we need to know the experiences because that's different. We're going into a residential situation to help people that are having an issue with a paranormal topic. We need to understand clearly what that is so we can try to replicate it so that we can debunk it or vet out what is causing them to feel the things that they're feeling and experience what they're experiencing. Basically trying to prove away that it's paranormal. Like, no, there's real world things that account for what you are talking about or what you're experiencing. It's different when we're going to like Eloise or Ohio State Reformatory or any of the locations we go to, where we're there to experience the space and we want to experience the paranormal. We're not necessarily trying to prove it, because again, like I always say, we're not going to be the ones that prove it. But it's important for us just to distinguish the two. When we're in for an actual, like a residential, we pare down our gear. We only use data loggers, those type of sensors, EVP recorders, things of the nature that are more tangible, that we have some data behind it that we can use to see things. And we use our personal feelings as the backup, the anecdotal side of it. In a location, we sort of let our feeling go, but then we use the gear to sort of validate or invalidate or try to debunk what it is we're experiencing. So let's flip the script for a little bit now. Here's what we don't use anymore and why. So we talked a little bit about the flashlight method. We do not use flashlights for communication. So the flashlight method is unreliable at best. Flashlight circuitry naturally flickers when it's loosened or temperature shocked. So we only use flashlights for one thing, and that is seeing where we're going. That's it. Cat balls. We don't use cat balls anymore. We used to because, again, they're fun, they're visual, but there's too many false triggers. Vibration, uneven surfaces, even bass sounds from miles away can set them off. They're cute, but they're really not evidence. And app-only tools. So unless we've cracked the code on how an app functions, we don't use it. Most ghost radar apps are random number generators with a spooky skin on them. Truth. Like, we do not use apps as sole tool. We might use it for entertainment. We might use it like in a fun way, but we're not using that as hard evidence. And then any one or done device. So anything that's a singular thing, we never use solo. We always use layers of things. So now you know what we don't use: flashlights, cat balls, a lot of apps, things of that nature. What are the ways that we at Pairs My Normal false proof our sessions? And this might be the most important part of the episode because every single piece of gear can throw a false positive. Your REM pod might react to walkie-talkies. Your EMF detector might spike from your phone. SLS camera might map a freaking coat rack, right? EVP might actually be someone whispering in the next room. So what do? We layer, we cross-check, we log everything. And at the start of each session, we baseline, we test every tool. We want to know how our tools are going to react in that environment on that day. What's setting it off? What's it not? What's the baseline of everything, right? And then we go through and we take note of environmental conditions. And then during our session, we really mark any of the things that we hear out loud. So if we hear a car go by, we just say car. If one of us makes a noise, we say, I made a noise. That was me. Someone sighed, someone laughed. People are talking outside. The more you mark it while you're recording, the better it will be for you afterwards when you're reviewing the data, that you don't forget what was going on. And then all of a sudden you forget people were talking outside the door. But when you're listening to the recorder, it sounds like an EVP. So this is really cool because I have a real world example of how this recently worked for us at Ohio State Reformatory. So we had all gonna have dinner downstairs in the break room at about 8 o'clock. So time comes, food's delivered, we're going down for it. So we set up a tripwire, and then I set up my Ghost Chatter app, and it records down the tripwire. So it's asking questions every couple of minutes. Totally alone, no one is in the area, everyone was having dinner. So looking back through the video, there was a point where it was asking a question, all the things go off, and you hear a sigh. It sounded like on the backside of my iPad. You could hear, like, very clearly. wow, that's really cool. I kept listening to it. I had other people listen to it. They all heard the same thing. It was clearly a breath in the microphone. And it was like, wow, that's actually really cool because all the camera showed no one else was around. Then I said, but this is just one point of view. I'm just seeing this camera's interaction. It's also an iPad. It's also like an MP4 recording. So it could have been digitally modified. What if we really weren't alone? What if it, is actually picking up a sound that's happening somewhere else in the building, but we just don't know? Well, I didn't have cameras going everywhere, but I did have my 360 audio running. And once I listened to that exact same spot on the 360 audio, it was clear we weren't alone up there, or that my gear wasn't alone up there. It was clear not all of us had gone out for dinner. People were in the East Cell block. They weren't near us, but I could clearly hear because of the spatial sound. They were in the East Cell block and they had made a noise over there that sounded totally different on the 360. It was a crisp, clear, edible sound that someone had moved something in the East Cell block. But on my iPad in the administrative ring at the Schoolfield exit sounded like a breath. So it's very important that you don't just run with one thing, that you really take the time to try to see what is going to help us debunk or gather the most information available so that we're able to really assess what's going on and not think we're experiencing things when we're really not. So in the case of gear, minimalism isn't less, it's actually more. And here's where we land. So after years of collecting, testing, and refining, we've built a kit that's not just smaller, it's smarter. We've learned that investigation isn't about throwing everything on the wall and seeing what sticks. It's really about staying present. It's about trusting your environment, your tools, and in your team. It's about reducing the noise so that you can hear other things. So at Paris My Normal, we use gear that helps us listen to the space, to the energy, to whatever story is unfolding around us. We don't need a dozen blinking lights to tell us a place is active. Sometimes the silence is actually louder. And when intuition lines up with motion triggers and lines up with the sound recorder, which lines up with the figure on a camera, that's when we get excited. Not because we caught a ghost, because let's be real, we don't know, but because we caught a moment, something that defies explanation. And that is what we chase after. So thanks for being here with us. We'll catch up with you next time. Until then, keep your recorders going, your camera steady, your gut instincts sharp. And remember, dear friends, don't fear the truth, follow it.